So you have a brilliant idea for a healthcare app and you're using AI to build it in a matter of days. But what happens when you hit the HIPAA compliance wall at 100 miles an hour? You might quickly realize that your miracle AI builder has trapped you in a proprietary garden that will cost you thousands of dollars and a total rewrite to make it actually secure. Today, we're breaking down the three flavors of AI development and identifying the walled gardens that you need to avoid. Stay tuned. Hello, and welcome back to the HIPAA Insider Show. Before we dive into the code, if you find our insights helpful, please make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. We're here to make healthcare data security and cloud technology accessible to every company, not just the mega corporations. I'm your host, Adam Zenedine, and I am joined today by Gil Vidals. Hey, Gil.
Hey, Adam, we have quite a good show today for our audience. We're talking about an evolution, a technical disruption, where non-technical founders are using tools like Cursor and Replit to create extensive and detailed platforms. But as you might guess, in health tech, vibes isn't going to be good enough. We have to look under the hood and see what's underneath those vibes.
Yeah, so we talked about in the intro, I talked about walled gardens, and we've talked about Base 44 in the past, but there are two other big names, Bubble.io and Glide. First of all, if you could maybe break down a little bit about the idea of walled gardens and why are these tools, Base 44, Bubble, Glide, etc. Why are these so risky for HIPAA?
Yeah, so let's break that down a little bit. You're using the term the walled garden. I think people are familiar with that, a garden that's completely isolated. Maybe it's inside of a church building where they have a courtyard and is completely sealed off from the outside world. And there are certain vibe coding platforms where they're a walled garden. They're using software that's not meant to be seen by the public. It's not meant to be exported. And so it's completely in its own bubble. So if you use those tools, you say, hey, I've made this platform in this tool. How do I get it out into the world now out in a HIPAA compliant environment? There's no path that particular platform provides. So that's kind of what we're talking about in today's episode, is to dissect that and so the public can understand what's going on there.
Yeah, so if I was to, if I had an idea for an application and I used one of those walled gardens, or another way to describe it is a tool with proprietary lock-in, what happens when, for example, I need a business associate agreement and a secure private cloud? Like, what has to take place to get that walled garden into an open field? I don't know if the analogy tracks there, but yeah.
Yeah. So it is. These are technical things we're talking about, and we do have all sorts of jargon in the tech world we can use. But essentially, what we're saying is that if you develop software, it works well, you're happy with it, but now you realize, oh, I need to put this software in a HIPAA compliant environment. Of course, that assumes that where it's currently residing is not HIPAA compliant. They won't sign a BAA and they're not claiming to be HIPAA compliant. So then you have your homework. You need to say, well, where am I going to move my great platform? I spent months, or I guess these days, maybe weeks creating it. So if it's done in that isolated means, the worst case scenario is you can't move it, right? There's no export facility. There's no known path that provider has given to basically migrate the code out to another environment. So I think that's kind of what we're talking about, is a segregation that you can't really figure out how to get that code out of there. They don't allow for that.
Yeah, so that code would presumably need to be rewritten elsewhere. Is that right?
Yeah, that's really the next step, is say, well, I got to rewrite that code in a different environment. So you're right about that, Adam. And we have seen people do that, actually. It's kind of interesting. An extensive platform that in the old days would take at least 12 months with several engineers writing it, and presto, in 3 days they wrote the whole thing And so sometimes that doesn't dissuade people. They say, oh, well, no problem. I'll rewrite it over here somewhere else.
I was talking to someone the other day, and they started out and they spent some time building an application in Base 44, and it took them another 6 hours to switch that application completely to another AI vibe coding tool called Replit or Replit, Replit. It took them 6 hours, and it was really, pretty straightforward for them. So I think that's what we're seeing. If the advantage let's talk about the advantage to Replit versus the walled garden a little bit, and then we can also talk about why that's not the final location for the app to be hosted.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to talk about it. So Replit is a platform that was created for portability. So there's one of those buzzwords we wanted to throw out there. So portability means that the code was created in a platform where they do make it so you can export the code and you can move it around, move it to a different location. So in the case of Replit, there's a path forward, and you can see the files that you've created. They're not hidden in the walled garden. They're not proprietary. It's your code, and they allow you to take it out and go somewhere else with it. And that means it's probably written in a standard language like Node.js or Python. Those are the common ones that we see.
So why do I need to move it at all? Like, why does it need this extra step? And I think that leads us to, talk about HIPAA compliance a little bit, right?
Yeah, sure. That's right, Adam. These platforms can make it so that the code is portable, and you have to ask yourself, well, why is it portable? Well, this is the feature of the platform, and Replit, as an example, they don't claim to do any kind of HIPAA compliant hosting. It's not part of their business model. They don't want to do that kind of work. So they allow you to take your code out, and you need to move it somewhere else that has the HIPAA compliant infrastructure. So remember, the code is residing on computers. There's networks involved. There's security layers. There's a lot to those platforms. Even though with your eye, all you see is the beautiful web pages and the buttons and those kinds of things. But underneath, there's all sorts of layers of technology. And so you have to then take your code base that's hosted somewhere that's not claiming to have all the security and regulations or that adhere to the regulations. So that's the motivation to move it and to make sure that it's moved into a safe and secure environment.
Okay. So we've established walled gardens. I mean, might be good for an initial concept, but for the next stage, really, the application needs to move to a more of a non-proprietary platform and code. And then once the application is built, it needs to move to a HIPAA compliant host. I just wanted to throw in a question about another approach, which we've seen a lot of vibe coders graduating to, which is Cursor. Could you talk a little bit about that? Cursor.
Yeah.
Sorry, my
Cursor.
It's difficult to understand.
No, we got it. So Cursor is a different approach where a vibe coder can set up an environment on their local machine. So they're coding it on their local machine. That implies that, that the files that are open, the program, the software that's being created is right there on your local machine. So you have access to it right away. It's right there on your system. And so that gives you more control. And it's a different approach that some people prefer. And Cursor has become pretty popular.
Okay, and I assume that makes the transition to a HIPAA compliant production environment, let's say hosted by HIPAA vaults, more seamless.
Yeah, I don't know that I would say the word seamless, because there could be quite a bit of work to do to migrate it, but it makes it so that the vibe coder has an easy path to take that file, the programs, probably it's not one file, but the programs, the application, to move it and transfer it somewhere else. So it does make it much simpler and easier to do that.
Well, Gil, if a founder's listening right now and they're about to start their build, what is one rule that they should live by?
I'd like to say there's one rule, but I'm going to tell you I think there's two. The first one is make sure that it's VPC-ready, virtual, private cloud ready, or virtual public cloud ready. So in other words, you could take it and move it to a cloud. But the other rule that I think is equally important is understand the platform that you're on, the vibe coding platform, whether it's Replit or Cursor, and investigate. Spend a half hour, an hour investigating how to feed that platform, or how to enable the guardrails, like how to instruct the AI to make secure code. You could tell it this is going to be code for handling medical and patient information. We need to make sure it's robust, it can meet all the HIPAA regulations. So that would be something that's not hard to do, but don't get overly excited and just jump right into the code. Let's spend some time preparing the AI, prepping it for the type of project that's going to have sensitive information, and it needs to be coded in a secure way. So I know that's a long way of saying it, but basically you want to prep the AI by giving it some instructions ahead of time of how to behave and how to code it.
Portability is a large part of compliance. And if you can't take your ball and go home, meaning export your code, you don't truly own your compliance destiny. All right, Gil. Well, this has been very insightful. So I think that the common theme here is don't let the speed of vibe coding blind you to the long-term costs of proprietary platforms. Thanks for watching this episode of the HIPAA Insider Show.